Hey, I'm Taylor Ray. I'm guest interviewing today, and you're listening to the Good News Podcast, sponsored by Move 92. Today, we're talking with Geneva Pritchard herself on a topic that connects two things you wouldn't think actually go together. Let me set this up a little bit. We're going to talk about a talk. That is a presentation that Geneva is giving for International Women's Day. But this just isn't any talk. It makes some connections in a way that most people are surprised to hear, and it backs it up with statistics and research that, for me, is the exciting part. So let's start with the title. It's called Record Breaking Heat Waves and Supercharged Storms, which to my ears sounds like a talk for Earth Day, not International Women's Day. So, Geneva, break us into this slowly and tell us what you're up to here, even starting with this title.
Thanks, Taylor. I am really excited about this title because it takes a bit of a side door in talking about girls and women's education and leadership, especially on International Women's Day. One of the things we do at Move 92 is we make this strong correlation between the climate crisis and women's empowerment. And this talk that I'm giving is really data driven. So not only does it have good stories, it's going to have a lot of inspiring data and statistics that hopefully leave the listener going, wow, this connection between the climate crisis and women's empowerment is really compelling.
And that connection, those two ideas, climate crisis and women's empowerment, are the opening to an entire world of thinking differently. So, how about you set us up here with just that first one, climate crisis, and how we've thought about it traditionally?
So, the climate crisis, if we reflect back over the last 20 years, it's been really about thinking big. And what I mean by that is focusing on things like funding national policy or reforming industry, developing new technology, and being really heavy in thoughts about carbon offsets. So, a lot of money is spent partnering with government, business, and large organizations. So, again, thinking big about this impending catastrophe.
Mm, mm. Of course, there is a different way to think about it. I'm thinking of the book Drawdown. And what's exciting about Drawdown in this conversation is that it highlights 100 solutions that are deeply researched on how to address climate change. And these solutions are practical, they're based on existing technology. Tell us a little bit more about Drawdown and how this fits into the picture.
So, Drawdown is really the base of this talk that I'm giving. And what I love most about this book is it's really hopeful. It's written in such a beautiful way. And the whole theme of Drawdown is it's not game over, it's game on. So, this book contains a lot of evidence talking about that not only can we slow climate change, we can reverse it. And the word drawdown means the point in time where greenhouse gases peak and then decline. And the most exciting part about the book is it's full of solutions that you don't necessarily think of when you think of the climate crisis. And so, what I love about that is it's very easy to feel overwhelmed and helpless when it comes to the climate crisis. I know I certainly have been in that space before. And then I read the book Drawdown, and I just feel like my mentality shifted because there are so many different ways to be an active participant in addressing the climate crisis. And I don't have to go out and do something like buy the new Tesla or put solar panels on my whole house or become vegan. There are ways that are surprising, like focusing on clean energy or educating girls in low income countries or creatively using land that will pull carbon out of the air.
You've just said a number of things that I want to double click on. One is the idea of practical solutions. Another is the idea of hope, reversing climate change. And then, of course, the thing that sticks into my mind as the shiny object that I'd love to double click on now is educating girls in lower income countries.
Yes, well, here is my side door that I was talking about earlier. And here's where we can tie this into International Women's Day. So, in the book Drawdown, the top 10 solutions, two in the top 10 have to do with educating girls and family planning. And the way Drawdown is set up is they measure these solutions by the number of gigatons of carbon that will not be released into the atmosphere between now and 2050 if these solutions are funded and implemented. So, first of all, I definitely had to Google what a gigaton was. And what it is it's a billion metric tons of carbon. So,
A billion metric tons.
yeah, yeah. That's what 1 gigaton is. So if we look at drawdown, the number one solution is refrigerant management, which is 89.7 gigatons of carbon. Now, educating girls is number 6 at 59.6. Family planning is number 7 at 59.6. And to me, what just gets me so fired up is these two things are typically intrinsically linked, educating girls and family planning. So if we put these numbers together, we're talking about 120 gigatons of carbon that could be prevented from being released into the atmosphere by funding educating girls and reproductive health.
Wow. Wow, that's astonishing.
It is astonishing, and it's backed up by a couple great quotes. One of my favorites is education of girls is the most powerful lever available for breaking the cycle of intergenerational poverty while mitigating emissions by curbing population growth.
Read that one again.
Ah,
Read that one again.
okay. Education of girls is the most powerful lever available for breaking the cycle of intergenerational poverty while mitigating emissions by curbing population growth.
So we have the most powerful lever available for both breaking the cycle of poverty and mitigating emissions. Uh,
Well, I can break that down a little bit because these statistics are interesting because they're daunting and they're inspiring.
mm.
So, if we look at what the most powerful lever means, so for example, if we had 100% enrollment of girls globally in primary and secondary school, by 2050, there would be 843 million fewer people in the world. Another stat is
Wait, I'm gonna slow you down here because say that again just so we can all take that in.
it's almost like if we close our eyes and imagine what would the world look like if every girl had the opportunity to attend primary and secondary school? Not only does that mean we have a world full of educated, brilliant girls, it also means we have 843 million fewer people in the world because these women also have had access to reproductive health and they get to choose what their family and their life looks like. And not only is that so wonderful for these individual women and families, this is a life-saving and life-changing and earth-changing way of addressing the climate crisis.
It's stunning.
And I think what's so compelling about this is these stats are driven by what women are saying that they want. And women want access to reproductive health and they want to be able to choose how many children they have. And this
Mm.
is so linked to availability and accessibility of education, reproductive health education, and reproductive health services.
And I know that the picture is much more complex. I think it's what 130 million girls are denied the right to attend school, and that schooling actually has costs associated with it. Your podcast with Douglas was talking about the costs of their uniforms or supplies,
Mm.
and that girls can often be useful for work with the family or water or cooking or farming, and that you can complicate this picture with cultures that prioritize boys. So the education of girls is even more important here.
It is. And there's even a second piece to that. It's the education of girls, but it's also addressing barriers that are unique to each cultural setting. And so if
Mm.
we look at maybe why girls aren't attending school in Sri Lanka, that will be different in Guatemala and in Kenya. And so it's not just funding girls and women, but it's funding locally led solutions to ensuring that more girls can get into school. And I'm gonna kind of put a pin in that because I have some stories I want to tell later. But that's really the heartbeat of Move 92 is direct funding to locally led organizations where we're really listening to the community on what are the barriers to girls going to school. And I will tell you, each story that we hear back is so unique and nothing that any of us could have ever thought of.
Well, I'll look forward to getting to that. Of course, you said locally led solutions, and I wanted to dive right in. But let's stay with the research a little bit longer. I'm thinking specifically about the reduction in vulnerability of communities to natural disasters. And I know that the studies have shown that educated women and girls are better able to cope with the shocks of natural disasters. They're less likely to be injured or displaced or killed,
Mm.
and that these findings are drawn from 125 countries in longitudinal studies. So the data is there.
Absolutely. And, whether it's in a developing country or here in New Zealand, we really see that women rise to the leadership roles in natural disasters. And this is something that I was really excited to see statistics back that up, in addition to just really inspiring stories. Very closely linked with that is the notion that educated girls become educated and confident women. One really interesting statistic is if women farmers receive the same resources as men, their farm yields rise, reducing the number of undernourished people by 150 million. Increased farm yield automatically means decreased deforestation. And the reason, kind of to dig a little bit deeper into this statistic, reducing the number of undernourished people isn't just because they're growing more on their plot of land. It's because when women run their own businesses, they spend the profits and the money not only back into the business, but on improving the welfare of their family, often spending money on education for their daughters. So, this
Mm.
amazing link again between supporting women farmers, which is going to grow more food, which is going to make more money, which is going to get more girls in school.
It becomes this slow loop that transforms things over time.
Yes, exactly. And again, in the introduction to Drawdown, which I've mentioned already, it's just written in such a hopeful tone. And when we think of that feedback loop, it's such a different feeling than if you think of the climate crisis that is just like, oh gosh, understandably, it's such a huge, catastrophic, impending doom, I feel like, that we're all trying to face. When we look at it through this different lens of the feedback loop we just talked about, funding women farmers, growing more food, more girls in school, all of a sudden, it's like, oh, okay, wow, this seems like something that I can really be a part of. I can fund these solutions and make a difference. Again, I kind of joke, but I mean, it's like a joke, but not a joke. You can be a part of the solution without having to buy a new Tesla.
Yeah, it strikes me when talking about how these things are related more deeply and more economically, that choice,
Mm,
women having choice is such a key piece in here.
mm,
And you've mentioned it with local communities talking about what they need and having a choice about what they build and how they innovate.
mm,
And here, women having a choice of where they spend their income. And I know when you were talking about the top 10 solutions, family planning was number 7. So number 6 was educating girls and women, and number 7 was family planning.
mhm,
And it's kind of an amazing idea to think that family planning is climate action,
mhm,
and especially around that idea of just being able to have choice. And I know that this particular topic can be a little bit fraught. In other words, there can be discussions that say, oh, this is about wealthy Western countries telling other countries how many kids they can have.
mm.
That's not the point here.
That's exactly right. And I know I keep going back to quotes, but I want to read this one quote that I found to be particularly powerful. I was just reading it in preparation and I was feeling a bit choked up. Um, As you know, I just did this all women's adventure race on the weekend, and I'm just really fired up with the community of women and how lucky we can be, those of us that have choice and access. And a world where all the women had all of the choice and access would be so beautiful. So, teeing up this quote, which is honoring the dignity of women and children through family planning is not about centralized governments forcing the birth rate down or up through policy, nor is it about agencies or activists. It's about freedom and opportunity for women and the recognition of basic human rights. Currently, the world faces a $5.3 billion funding shortfall for access to reproductive health care that women say that they want.
That idea of women say that they want the ability to have some influence over their own reproductive health
Mm.
is what we're talking about here.
It is. Roughly 214 million women in lower income countries say they want the ability to choose whether and when to become pregnant, but they lack the accessibility and availability to contraception. This results in approximately 74 million unwanted pregnancies each year. So, again, the controversial aspect of this is it's not about making fewer beautiful humans, but focusing on women's expressed desires to be able to focus on their life and their dream by having control over what their family looks like.
And we know from experience that addressing reproductive health isn't just about contraception. It's also about education about how your bodies work. It's about considering distance to your health center if you have issues with pregnancy or
It's so many things. In public health, there's kind of this four quadrant way of looking at reproductive health, and it's accessibility, acceptability, affordability, and availability. And so it actually it can be so complex because you could be living in a
Mhm,
rural setting and maybe you have access to reproductive health, to condoms or birth control, but the acceptability isn't there in the culture. Or maybe the affordability isn't there. And so in each cultural context, those four barriers each kind of play a very different and unique role.
mhm. Well, and, I know with Move 92's work, there are a couple of organizations that are doing extraordinary work in this area. Is this a time to talk a little bit about what you see on the ground and conversations you've had with real people?
Yeah, this is where it all gets really, really exciting because Move 92 was founded based on the inspiration felt from reading Drawdown. Because it's one thing to read these statistics and be inspired. And we wanted to take it to the next level, saying, wait a minute, we want to find the local organizations that are doing this in their communities, in their countries, and we want to figure out how to fund them directly. So, over the
Mm,
past 5 years, we have been searching the globe and working with philanthropists and working with organizations globally to get the money directly to these organizations. So, we have we have dozens of stories that we could tell about girls' education, but there's one in particular that I really want to share. And it's a school that we fund in Sri Lanka. And the reason why this story is so special to me is because of the unique cultural nuances that make this a successful education program. Now, the civil war in Sri Lanka only ended in 2011, and it was one of the longest, if not the longest, ongoing civil war that any country has ever experienced. This means that you can't just pluck a girl from her village and drop her into education and expect her to just hit the ground running. Her body is storing the generational trauma of decades of civil war, and they're deep into an economic crisis. There are so many external factors and internal traumas happening. And this program spends a good amount of time working through this trauma to untangle the knots of how is this manifesting in the reality of each individual young woman. And then once these knots are beginning to be untangled, then the rigorous education begins. And what this school is finding is these girls, once they're asked the question of what are your dreams and what are your hopes, there had to be a question before that, which was almost, did you know that you could have dreams and hopes? Okay,
mm.
so now you know that you can have them. What are they?
Wow.
And what this program is seeing is that these girls are excelling academically and they are building unique, creative, innovative dreams. And many of them are taking the exam to go to university and then going overseas to university and coming back. And what this is happening right before our eyes is generational change.
Mm.
That young women are seeing themselves as leaders, getting a university education, and coming back to inspire the next generation. We've been funding this program for 4 years now, and each year I am truly blown away by the stories of these young women overcoming war, economic crisis, and trauma to excel in education and then come back to their community.
And that giving back is a piece that I don't think we can underscore enough. That there is often this feeling of, I have had such a transformative experience. I need to help other people have that too.
Mm. Another program we fund in Sri Lanka, they have 64 staff members, and 62 of them are graduates of the program. So they were so inspired, life changing the program was, that they immediately wanted to change more lives with their new education and knowledge.
Oh, which program is that?
Tea Leaf Trust.
Oh, that's Tea Leaf Trust.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember reading something about them very recently in their English program. They take students who have no English to learning English that then go back and teach primary kids in the school, kind of that learn one, teach one.
Mm, mm.
And just think about that. Think about that in your own life, those times that somebody believed in you and gave you more responsibility than you had previously, and that opportunity to rise to the challenge.
Mm.
That's one of the things that strikes me in this work is that often, A, people rise to the challenge, and that B, there is this notion of, if I can do it, so can you, and let me show you.
It's also that women's education and leadership is a long game mentality. This is not a quick fix situation. And this is not a scale it up, more is better, big, big, big. This is a celebrating unique, culturally relevant solutions to slowly but surely get more women educated and into leadership positions. And the
Mm.
exciting thing is, sure, the road is long, but we're on the road. And so each step gets us closer and closer to a goal where I said earlier, this close your eyes and imagine a world where all girls had access to education. Well, at least what we know is that what we are seeing, organizations around the world dedicating their time to this, which makes it feel like we're putting one foot in front of the other towards this goal.
And you see it. You see it in the catch-up calls. You see it at the end of the grants.
Absolutely. And we give small grants. These are grants of about $10,000. These are not huge $1 million projects. These are small, responsibly spent grants
Mm.
in each country that we work with. Um,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but did you also have a story, a reproductive health story that you can share with us?
yeah, I do. Gosh, it was hard to choose this one as well. But I want to share a story about an organization in Guatemala. And Guatemala has a large indigenous population that don't speak Spanish. They speak their indigenous languages. And so, one of the issues is safe birthing practices in the rural areas where there's no accessibility to hospitals and there's often a lot of language barriers. So, one of the organizations we work with called Maya Health Alliance, they created an app, a mobile app that was just using pictures. So, to address that language barrier, where they were able to clearly understand what symptoms and side effects that women were experiencing during pregnancy, breech baby, preeclampsia, high blood pressure, or any other significant birthing complication by using different pictures. They were able to get the symptoms earlier, which meant they could triage who needed to go to the hospital and who could safely have a home birth. This wasn't someone in a Western country saying, hey, I've come up with a great innovation for safe birthing practices in Guatemala. This was midwives in Guatemala saying, language is our biggest barrier. We need something creative. And so it was in partnership with the midwives working in the rural areas that the idea for this app came to fruition.
And that's in use in the field now.
Yes.
They're using it now?
Yeah, absolutely.
What I love about the essence of this story is that it takes away the speculation of, well, could this work? Could that work? And it actually drives towards the things that everybody knows will work. And Geneva, I know you have stories coming out of your ears, and I want to wrap this up in a way that leaves people feeling solid about this message. What's the take home of this presentation for International Women's Day?
So, the reason why I wanted to take a side door in talking about girls and women's education and leadership on International Women's Day is this is not a rah rah, girls will save the world mentality. This is a statistically backed by results, evidence based, saying that shifting funding to support girls and women's education and reproductive health is one of the most powerful ways of addressing the climate crisis. So I want to leave people feeling really inspired that the climate crisis doesn't have to be something that is talked about in a helpless way. It's something that can be talked about in a creative way. And of course, in the book Drawdown, the one that resonated with us, me personally, and at Move 92 was the element of girls and women. But hop on the book and look at the other solutions to see which one resonates with you. And you'll find the interconnectedness is so inspiring. And Taylor, I want to say thank you so much for this time today because I've been having a lot of small snippets of conversations with people about the relationship between girls' education and the climate crisis. And most people say, oh my gosh, what? I want to learn more. But it's usually at school pickup or drop off or making a cup of coffee at my co working space. And I just felt like it was so important to take the time to share what we have learned and back it up by stats and stories to make people feel just a bit more hopeful about things that can sometimes feel quite daunting. So, kind of going back to your initial question, which is what's the takeaway? My takeaway is if you want to make a positive impact on the climate crisis, it turns out funding grassroots organizations that are working in girls' education and reproductive health is going to be an enormously powerful way to be a positive impact in the climate crisis.
Okay, good. So I don't have to go to the vegan restaurant every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I can actually put my money in grassroots organizations that are working to elevate girls and women. And I know that I am doing something positive for people and for the planet.
Absolutely.
Well, Geneva, I am looking forward to International Women's Day and the kind of brilliance that happens when women really come together to share what it is that we know and our visions for the future. The work of Move 92 is so powerful, and I look forward to more Good News podcasts. Thanks again,
Thanks,
Geneva.
Taylor. This was fun.